The very center of biblical theology is the gospel. The gospel is the good news. The gospel isn't just a sort of feeling that we might have. It's not a resolve to have Jesus as a friend or example or to live right. The gospel is the good news that tells us the truth about God.
The gospel is the only way sinful people can be reconciled to God. The gospel is the motivation for our obedience as Christians. The gospel is what enables us to worship God, to come into the presence of God. Through the gospel, our worship of God is acceptable. So the gospel is central in the life of the Christian and needs to be central in the life of the church. And so where we need to begin is with a clear understanding of the gospel.
The gospel is that great news, that great story, that great accounting of what God has done to redeem sinners for himself. A holy and a loving God has sacrificed his only begotten Son, who himself was perfectly righteous and obedient to the Father, so that sinners who were anything but righteous and anything but obedient might not be left filthy in our sin and left the objects of God's wrath, but might be redeemed from his coming wrath, cleansed by the blood of Christ, made now the objects of his love, children in his household. That message is utterly unique in the world.
It's all about him that I find my freedom, not in living for myself, but in living for my Creator. And I don't deserve to be given a chance at that kind of life. I deserve to be cast out from his presence forever because of the way that I've robbed his glory rather than lived for it. And yet in Christ, I'm being brought into a relationship where through his sacrifice of paying for my sins, I can once again be restored.
This is from God. I can't make this happen. I can't create this. It is outside of my power and competence. But as I read, one guy said one time, God interrupted me on my way to hell. God did something I could not have done myself. And a church then is full of people who gather around the gospel and recognize that in our own lives. That is the best news we have ever heard.